As a start to this Standing Committee annual report meeting with the department, I'd like us all to stand and observe a moment of silence for all our teachers, all our education professional staff, our learners parents who have succumbed to COVID during our last annual report and this one. Please let us observe a moment of silence. Thanks. Thank you very much. You may be seated. We are doing our annual report today. My name is Lorraine Botha. I am the chairperson for the Standing Committee Education. I'm going to ask all members, both present in the chamber as well as those that are online, to please introduce yourselves for the record, and then I will go to the Minister, the SG, and the department official staff who are present here to please introduce yourselves. Are there any staff online?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, all right, thanks, SG. Members, starting with you. Thank you, in the chamber.
Morning, Chairperson Khalid Sayed, member of the committee.
Good morning, Chairperson Khalil Barankes, alternative member of the Education Committee.
Good morning, Chairperson. Good morning, Phil Christians, a member of this committee. I forgot what to say.
Been a long time, has it? Members online?
Good morning, Chairperson Gillian Postman, and good morning to all the colleagues.
Good morning, Chairperson. Good morning to the meeting and to the members of the department. My name is Member Makamba Boja. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Minister, starting with you.
Hi, my name is Debbie Schaefer, I'm Provincial Minister of Education, Western Cape.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Brent Walters. I am the Head of Education for the Western Cape.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Archie Lewis, the TDG for Institution Development and Coordination.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Leon Eli, DDG for Corporate Services.
Good morning, Salia Abrams, Deputy Director General Education Planning.
Good morning, everyone. Berenice Daniels, Director of Inclusive and Specialized Education Support, WCD.
Good morning, everyone. Clinton Walker, Directorate E-Learning.
Good morning, everyone. Berna Hammond, Director Communication.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Sigamani Naika, Chief Director for Inclusive Education Special Programs.
Morning, everyone. Matthijs Kroon here, Chief Director, People Management Practices.
Good morning, Chairperson and members. Erna Veldman, Chief Director, Financial Management.
Good morning. My name is Wanda Conrad, Director, Business Strategy and Stakeholder Management.
Morning, everyone. Harun Mohammed, DDG Curriculum Assessment Management.
Thank you very much. On my left, I have Wasima Hassan Musa, who is our Procedural Officer, and on my far left, I have Mary Ann Burgess, who is the Assistant Procedural Officer. I'd like to welcome everybody else who has joined on the MS Teams platform. And then I'd also like to highlight that we have our sign language interpreters with us as part of inclusive education for everybody else to follow. Then I'd like to say to those that are on the MS Teams platform that please use the chat function for raising points of order, and also use the raise your hand function if you are going to pose a question. Now, in regard to the annual report and how we're going to do this, members, I'd just like you to follow my directive We are assigned to be here up until 1 o'clock. We are going to be here up until 1 o'clock only. We are not going to come back after SCOPA. So we are going to finish up our part of the annual report. We shall not come back the year after. I'd like to say that we're going to break for tea at about 10:30. I'd also want to direct you that I would want to stop with the department at 12:15. There are others who have shown interest in the annual report and want to pose questions. So after 12:15, I will give them an opportunity, and then that gives us enough time. Also, it gives enough time for the department to respond, but also for us to wrap up on our administrative tasks regarding this annual report. Then SCOPA will start at 2 this afternoon. Then in regard to the annual report, the governance section will be dealt with by SCOPA this afternoon, as well as the financials for this department will also be dealt in SCOPA. So I will not allow you to pose questions on those sections. If you have prepared those questions in regard to the governance and the financials, you will ask it in SCOPA this afternoon. Okay. And I think the SCOPA is on the virtual platform. It's not in the chamber, if I'm correct. It is virtual. Then everything else in this report we shall handle here during our session. Now, our first session is pages 5 to 26. It's now 9:10 according to that clock. We will go with that up until the tea break. Then we will break and we will come back. We will then do the performance information as well as the human resource management. Members, you on track with me here? Member Allen, just to give you an opportunity, sir, good morning, to introduce yourself.
Good morning. It's probably not fitting to be 5 minutes late for education due to an accident on the N1, but I'm happy to be here. Thank you, Chairperson. Regan Allen.
Okay, we will negotiate detention for you. You are late. Okay, thank you very much, Minister. SG, your first annual report with us today. All the best for you, sir, and all the best for the department. Minister, an opportunity for you in regard to your forward and then to the SG. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and good morning to all the members. A good afternoon to Member Allen. Detention will be in my office afterwards. Obviously, I want to, as the Chair has mentioned, just acknowledge that this is the SG's first annual report as SG. So be nice to him. Yeah, that was nice to him. They're just nasty to me, so it's okay, don't worry. Anyway, I think 2020 really has been one of the hardest years in living memory for most of us, for many of us certainly. Education has been affected hugely in many, many ways. Anxiety and fear of all involved, our teachers, parents, learners, grief and loss that has been suffered. And of course, for us particularly, the huge learning losses that have been, that we are still enduring because of the rotational timetabling, which will affect us for years to come. But despite the difficult year we've had, I really was very proud of our department and how we've managed to cope during this time. We are, I think, one of the few departments that actually did work from home, and those who were working, and many weren't able to even work from home. And I really want to commend all our staff for what they've done during this period of time. E-learning was phenomenal, as well as curriculum. I can't believe what they have done on our e-portal, how they swung into action to try and make things available for our learners, easy curriculum sort of sheets that they can see what they have to do on a weekly basis. They really, really were absolutely wonderful. We stepped in, of course, with feeding when SASA was missing in action and went into shutdown when people needed them most. And I think that also was a huge, it was something that was very, very necessary and much appreciated by those who needed it. It was therefore hardly surprising that the matric results did go down last year countrywide. But even there, we're still very proud of our matrics and the teachers who helped them, as we dropped by the lowest percentage in the country, and also lower than an average national decrease. So we did in spite of all of that, also see a very pleasing increase in our number and percentage of bachelor passes, which I think is quite a huge achievement also. We retain top spot in the country for our retention from grade 10 to 12 also, which of course puts extra pressure on our schools for Mr. Lewis to manage with learner numbers trying to get accepted. And there are a number of other academic achievements that we also managed to achieve, which are listed in my forward, which I won't go into in detail. My particular pride is the Schools Evaluation Authority, which I believe has the potential to be one of the single most influential drivers of education improvement, school improvement. And the way that they innovated during this time also to evaluate how schools were coping with the new way of doing things, how they were managing with teaching and learning under these circumstances was really commendable. They have now reverted to their normal evaluations, and a number of reports already are on their website, which is up and running now. And I really, really urge people to go and look at those reports, everybody, and communities also, to go and see how well their schools are performing. It's not only one measure that's being looked at, it's a whole assortment of different issues, including teaching and learning quality, also including parental involvement, and people could really get some good ideas as to how they can assist the schools in improving, because very often it is also community involvement that helps schools to improve. Going forward, we are going to have to put immense effort into addressing the learning gaps caused by the measures that we have had to adopt. We also have to continue rolling out STEAMAC and the 3-stream strategy to ensure that our learners are able to be active participants in the economy when they leave school and have the required skills that they need. And of course, we are also hoping that partnerships will assist with that, especially in the light of the current financial constraints. We also will have a job on our hands addressing staff wellness, and the table on page 31 particularly is of huge concern, which shows the increase in illnesses such as depression and neurological illnesses of our staff. And lastly, but certainly not least, we've managed to get another unqualified audit. It was pretty close to clean as far as I gather. And I really want to congratulate especially Mr. Eli and his finance team, Ms. Feldman. They have done a phenomenal job. It's been 8 months, and that needs to be looked into also, of slogging and sweating blood with the Auditor General. And also to ensure that they put in the systems in place which enable us to do this. It is really an outstanding achievement for an education department of this size, magnitude. And as the new SG says, there are a lot of moving parts he's discovered, and that is quite right. There are a huge number of moving parts. So I really want to just congratulate the whole team on this achievement and on our performance during this year. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Minister. Good morning, Chairperson and members of the committee and colleagues. Thank you very much for the opportunity to address you this morning and to be here for the annual report. I want to start off where the Minister left off and just give a little bit of my reflection on the year under review. And I'm going to start off where the Minister spoke about moving parts. And I just want to remind us that listening on the platform how many moving parts there are actually to the system. Because that is the thing that struck me when I came into this organization. Volume actually does change outcome. And I think we underestimate that. There are 43,000 staff inside this organization with 40,000 at school level. 40,000 or the 43,000. We have more than 1.1 million learners, more than 1,500 public schools, and then about 300 independent schools. We have to deal with the role of SGBs, role of unions, role of parents, and many commentators inside this terrain. In this terrain, education is everyone's business. We've also got a national department. My impression of the national department is many things come out from the national department that we have to then implement. All these things, I think, impact on the business of education. And therefore, when Minister speaks about the admirable kind of action that our staff have taken in the year under review, which was a most disrupted year, I think it is admirable, if you think about it. Just to say that the department met 70% of its targets, just under 70% of its targets. It spent 97.7% of its budget. And it had to deal with many, many uncertainties inside that year. COVID-19, we really mentioned in the beginning, in the opening remarks of the chairperson, and we acknowledge all the parents, all the teachers, all the students that have been lost to COVID-19. But I think for education, it brought a level of uncertainty that was unheralded, and this was the year under review. The uncertainty, the fear of people, and managing that, balancing that with the idea that we actually do have to get children into school, and the children are losing out if they're not in school. And hence, as you of course know, there were very many moves to get people back into school. And then we have the trimmed curriculum and many other factors that the department actually engaged in to deal with this uncertainty. Unfortunately, rotational learning went forward into the current year, and it is something that we need to look at. But the year was very disrupted with only the grade 12s enjoying some level of normality inside that year. And I think, Minister, even though you mentioned about the matric results, I think given the disruption of the year, matric results were admirable. I think the one other thing that I perhaps just want to mention, two other things, last 2 points from my side. I think what is happening also is that in that space of uncertainty, you also have directions coming out, which the department had to respond to. Sometimes these directions didn't really measure up with each other, and we still had to make sense of it. You know, we had to, for example, quickly get into a situation where sanitizers provided, masks provided, 2 masks for each child. Now, I go back to the question of volume. So when I was in DCAS, as of course all of you on this platform know, and when you talk about volume, let me get it for staff, then I'm talking 2,000-3,000 people. But in this department, we say give 2 masks to every learner. It's 2.2 million. It's two different equations, and I think I asked the committee to just take that fact into account as we go through the annual report today. I think very quickly also the department pivoted to the 3 focal points of the Western Cape government in response to COVID-19. Besides the health response, there was a recovery response to focus on jobs, well-being and safety. The Minister already mentioned the question of well-being, but one of the other things which is not being mentioned by the Minister, which I want to mention, having been involved in it, is the department's pivot to use its platform to sort out hunger inside the province. In the humanitarian effort, when people weren't moving around and food wasn't going to where it should be, we used the platform of the education system, the reach into every community, and use that feeding scheme to actually complement what was happening elsewhere in DSD and other departments. So I think all in all, I think the year was tough, but I think that the department is ready here today, Chairperson, to give an account for what we have done as a department. I think it was a tough year and a very unusual year. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, SG, and thank you to the Minister for that opening remarks, members. I just want to check with members Bosman and Bakamba Bocha. Our audio is good enough for you?
Yes, Chairperson, it is.
Yes, Chairperson.
Thank you. Thank you. Members, I just want to ask you to work with me. So please be guided by the directive I give. I'm going to do pages, what is it? 5 to 26, but I'm also going to include the opening remarks of both the Minister and the SG, if you wish to pose questions to that. I take it that you have worked through the annual report, and we are not each other's enemy here today, but time is our enemy. Okay, so please be disciplined in terms of time. I want to also ask you to pose your question. Nie met 'n lang aanloop nie. Come quickly to the question that you want to ask, please. So with that said, I'm going to give you an opportunity to, for this round, pose 2 questions per member. Any hands, any takers? Member Christians, do I note you? Member Bosman, I note you as well. Member Sayed thereafter, and Member Allen. So it's in that order. Christians, Bosman, Sayed and Allen. Thanks.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you for the Minister and the HOD. 2 questions. The one question that I want to ask is with the COVID situation at our schools, I've got a letter to say, you know, at certain schools, students are forced to be vaccinated. They said they sent it to the minister, the question. I just want to know, what is the department's stance on pupils that must be forced to be vaccinated? And the person says that they are scared that they will be victimized and intimidated if they do not have the pupils, if they're not vaccinated. So what is the department's stance on that? Minister can tell me about that. And the second question is just on page 11, we have the pass rate of the maths, lits and pure maths. Just a question, there's a big problem when it comes to math literacy, because if you go to certain townships, there's no pure maths at certain townships. And what they do is the children are forced to take maths lit. And when I was in Manenberg, you know, it's very difficult for a parent to send a child to Athlone for pure maths. So we are actually forcing our children into a direction, and many of our children do want to do pure maths, but there's no opportunity because they don't have even food on the table to get to, and how do they do that? So, and then also, so if people don't do well in maths, they are, you know, for pass rates, they are forced to do math lit. I just want to know, because it limits the child's advancement in life to do a specific thing. And I know there's a lot done to help our children. I just want to know, what is, you know, how does the department explain this? That we are driving children in a direction, and we know that they cannot even go to a University of Cape Town with math lit if they don't have pure math. So just an understanding on that. What is the department doing when it comes to that? So that's two questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I wanted members to ask that if your question is in the AR, please just indicate the page, but you have member questions. So just going forward, just indicate, but you can pose your general questions in regard to the remarks that was made by both the SG and the Minister. Member Bosman.
Thank you, Chairperson. My question, the two questions follow on pages 9 to 12. And I just wanted to know how the province was able to achieve a matric pass rate at the height of the pandemic with the least declined percentage if we compare to the other provinces. How was that done? And then also in the MEC's forward, she speaks of South Africa not being completely COVID-free for the foreseeable future. And so adaptation and innovation is necessary at schools. Can the MEC give us some examples of what this looks like? And also, has there been any foresight and planning in this regard from the National Department of Basic Education for provinces? Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. Member Said.
Thank you, Chairperson, and my greetings to the Minister and to the SG, and welcome to the new SG as well. My first question is on paragraph 4, page 11. There's reference being made to the matric pass rates of for the various districts. I just wanted to get a sense, do we at this moment have details of the support package that is offered to the districts, particularly those districts with a pass rate below I mean, okay, I'm looking specifically at the Metro East because that remains a concern. And not only the package for this year, but for next year, more important, because I think this year is already done and the matrics are busy. So I just wanted to get a sense as to what is the support package in that regard. Then, and still on page 11, paragraph 5, I'll ask the rest in the next round. There's reference to the systemic tests that have been conducted. I just wanted to get a sense as who is the service provider there and why did it refuse to perform the tests? There's reference made to a refusal to perform the tests. And then when responding to that, if you could just get a sense as to what was the remedial action that was taken. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Said. Member Brunkhuis. Was it? Or Member Allen, sorry.
Thank you so much, Chairperson. And I'm covered partly, but I have to ask too if the Minister can indicate whether there has been any guidance from National Department of Education with regard to page 11, where the Minister made reference to the Schools Evaluation Authority. And if there's been any key lessons coming from National in terms of the report conducted so far and any information coming to you from the Schools Evaluation Authority. But then in terms of STEM Act, I see that you have noted there's been a shift from STEM. How would that potentially impact learners and our economy moving forward? If the Minister can elaborate on that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Allen. Member Bakamba Bocha.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and good morning to all in the meeting. My first question is on page 14, on the second paragraph from the bottom, where it says the department developed and provided resources for online learning via e-portal that was accessed by the learners, teachers, and parents. So my question there is, which resources specifically were given to learners to take part in this online learning? And also, did the department provide learners with internet data in order to make learning accessible to everyone, including learners from disadvantaged backgrounds? And two, on page 16, regarding reasons for under expenditure on program 4, where it talks about public special schools education, it says there that there's an under expenditure that was as a result of vacancies not being filled, as well as temporary educators not being appointed. So what was the reason for vacancies not being filled and temporary educators not being appointed? And on page 16, Chair, under the title Reasons for Underspending, and that are as follows. I'm not quite satisfied with the actual reasons that are given there. Number one, can the department please account with detailed reasons why millions of rands were not used and only to be surrendered to National Treasury? This is the same department that always complained that there is not enough budget being allocated to the Provincial Education Department, and now the same department returns millions of unused rands to the National Treasury. So why is that? And my last question is on page 18, where there is a report of irregular expenditure to the value of more than 5.8 million, resulting from incidences of non-compliance with Treasury regulations on procurement of goods and services. My concern, the Chairperson, is that if it's a situation is like this, that provides room for corruption within the department, can the department then give us a detailed explanation on those incidents as to what happened exactly for millions of rands to be wasted in such manner? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Minister SG, that is the round of questions for now. Members, if you need to follow up on the response to your question, please do that after we got the whole set of responses. Thank you, SG. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Chairperson. Yes, the issue of the schools being forced, it's not being forced to vaccinate, but they seem to feel that they are forced by peer pressure. I mean, I have received that email, the SG will deal with it, because I did send it on to them to ask them to deal with it, because our approach has been that we will not vaccinate at schools, that people who qualify for the vaccines can go and get vaccinated, but that we were not going to do it at school. But he will answer that further. I completely agree with you on maths and maths literacy, honourable Christians. It's an issue I've been driving for quite a long time now. There are a number of reasons why. Some of them being that we don't have enough maths teachers for pure maths. And one of the things I've been asking the department to look at, and I know they are working on, and hopefully Mr. Mohammed can maybe assist in that, is to try and get good maths teachers to do streaming lessons to places where they don't have a maths teacher, particularly rural communities. Sometimes there are only a very few number of learners there who can do maths, who want to do maths, but they really do want to do it, and they aren't able to because it doesn't justify a teacher post for that. So that is one of the things we're really looking into to try and expand that offering. The other thing that is a problem I have identified is that sometimes people want to take maths literacy because they see it as an easier way to get a higher percentage mark. So sometimes that assists in getting them into university courses, for example, or higher education courses that they want. The other reason is that schools sometimes, I think, also try and force people to take maths literacy for the same reason, because it makes their marks look better. And I don't think that's what we should be doing in education. And I think we should relook at the league table reporting of matric results, because I think that does tend to lead to that. And whereas what our economy needs is people passing maths at 50% or above, many people who could do that are not doing that because of those reasons. And I agree it is a problem, and it is something we are certainly discussing internally. And I have also raised it nationally. So I think we really need to look at what we're wanting to achieve. We want people to leave school with the abilities to make a real impact on our economy. Not, obviously we want them to do well academically too, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's bad academics to pass maths at 50% instead of maths lit at 80%. There also is a place for maths literacy, yes, but I do think there are a lot more people who can and should be taking pure math. As far as Honourable Bosman, how do we achieve a matric pass rate with the least decline? I'll leave that also to my experts, but I do know that there's a lot of hard work that goes into it. A huge amount of hard work. The details, I think Mr. Mohammed hopefully can deal with, and or Mr. Mayor, who are here. And they both are very involved with the school programs. We've done holiday programs and all kinds of other things. It did also assist having matrics at school every day, but I think they did that across the country. But it really also shows the levels of commitment of our learners and our teachers to be able to get to that point. I also think it's a culmination of many years of investment into their education, which we have done in the Western Cape. You can't only focus on matric. You have to start further down. And I think that's a culmination of all of those things. Innovations and foresight, the new way of doing things, it's a difficult one because Honourable Makamba Botchia touched on the issue of connectivity. So you can't do everything remotely for many, many people. But what we are doing in the department is trying to ensure that there are more ways of having education offered to learners. And we're looking currently at expanding options for online schooling. You know that UCT online school is starting. We are trying to ensure that there are regulations in place for other institutions that may wish to do something similar. And I know even there in poor communities, some people are signing up for that because they say they spend that much money on transport every month. So there's certainly scope in that arena. And also, what else are we doing? Homeschooling as well. There are a lot of people doing home education, and they can also access online curriculum from home. And we're also looking at how we can allow more options for home education, obviously subject to satisfactory quality controls and so on and so forth. Anything else my department can add? Honourable Said, matric pass rates. Yeah, my officials can also answer the packages for the districts as to what we do to assist the matrics. Systemic test service provider is UCT. They did not feel that they were willing to go into classrooms and administer the tests under COVID conditions. We couldn't, unfortunately, mitigate because it's an annual test, and we were quite disappointed because we really wanted to see measurable, a real objective measurement of how bad the impact was. But it is being done this year, and we have resolved that issue. Then, Honourable Allen, we haven't received guidance from National because the C is actually a Western Cape initiative. As you probably know, it forms part of the Western Cape Schools Education Amendment Act that was passed a few years ago, and that is being taken to court by SATU and Equal Education. The National Minister has agreed to abide by the decision of the court. She's not actively opposing it, which I really welcome. So there's no guidance really. I would kind of don't want to sound arrogant or cocky, but I would quite like them to take some guidance from us on this issue, because I really feel that it's something that could be done nationally. I know there are some other provinces they have shown a lot of interest in it, and I honestly believe that it could be something that could be rolled out nationally, and that could make a real difference. STEMAC, potential impact is quite substantial. Obviously, it would fit in better with the three-stream model, particularly the agriculture. So that's the 1A, the agriculture. We are a huge producer of agricultural products in the Western Cape, and the more learners who are able to contribute to that and can leave schools with those kind of skills, the better for them to be able to find work, and for us in our economy to be able to produce more and more agricultural products. Arts is an interesting one because kind of counterintuitively, arts actually assists in improving mathematics, I understand, from those who know. My SG is nodding. And it's a strange thing, but it's been quite neglected over the last number of years. It's been seen as sort of an add-on or an extra or nice to have, but actually it's quite crucial as part of the holistic development of a learner. And it also does improve other subjects. So that's a double benefit. And of course, coding and computational skills is an essential in the modern economy. So that will also, the whole intention is to try and align more the skills that are needed in the economy with what we're producing in schools. Because at the moment, it makes no sense when you have a huge amount of unemployment youth, but they actually haven't got the skills that are needed in the economy. And then you have to import those skills. So that is the intention and the benefits of that. Honourable Makamba Butcher, I think most of those are finance questions, the resources, internet data, vacancies, that's for Mr. Cornier. I'll leave the rest to the SG, I think, on that. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Minister. Let us add to some of the answers, and then also ask some of my colleagues to just deal with some of the others. I think just on the question, to add to the question of the maths and the maths lit, I think obviously we share that concern as a department. Mr. Mohammed can speak to some of the kinds of efforts we are making. It's one is about the shortage of teachers, but that's not the thing that drives it first is the choice issue. Ultimately, parents have a choice, and the choice is presented to them, maths or maths lit. So then after a while, what happens if too many children choose maths lit inside that environment, then it doesn't become justifiable to keep that subject going, because now then it raises other issues. But I think your point is well taken, to be able to say that obviously you disadvantaging students, maybe inadvertently. On the other hand, the counter argument could be that many children you want them to have a matric certificate. So some of you caught between these two things, and the department, Mr. Mohammed, will speak to it in his input, because Mr. Mohammed is also going to speak to the support package that we have developed for students, and I think you can just maybe to just add to that answer. I think just also to add to the Minister's answer on adaptation, we spoke about the e-portal we have. Minister spoke about the streaming of lessons. There's also Mr. Mohammed's section dealing with curriculum support. We've got a telematics program. People can engage with that. We also had winter and spring schools to look at a question of trying to make up for essentially what was happening inside that environment. Systemic tests, the Minister has dealt with that, but I think the one thing that I want to add is in the requirement for the systemic tests, one of the paragraphs said that the people that we actually use to conduct the tests need to be retired people of mature age. So then that caused UCT to have, I think, a bit of an issue, because at that time, you would of course know COVID-19, the unknowns in relation to it and so on. But I think that's behind us now, and we've completed a full set of systemics this year, and I think we'll be able to see what the result has been. If I could ask if Mr. Mohammed can please come in on some of the things that that he can add to, and then I would like to ask the CFO if you could just deal with the questions of under expenditure and also irregular expenditure that have been raised in this hearing. Mr. Mohammed, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, SG. Good morning, colleagues. So on the issue of the support package, when lockdown was announced last year, the first thing we did is we consolidated our e-portal. But parallel to that, as with everywhere else, we enabled every single teacher in the province to have access to MS Teams. And what that did Was it enable us to communicate with teachers on a very different way compared to pre-COVID? And just as a headline point, as a result of the access of MS Teams, we were able to run about 5 major mediation sessions on all the curriculum challenges that arose and the requirements that were amended. In one session, we were able to cover 44,000 staff in a 4-day period. On the e-portal, as was indicated in the annual report, we were able to quadruple the amount of traffic that was on the e-portal, including use of our material by teachers across the country. One of the things we picked up as a result of the focus on the digital is quite a number of teachers and learners indicating that they didn't have access to e-learning devices. We then topped up for about 1,100 schools the printing budget. These schools were identified by our districts as schools being in need, and each school was then provided with a facility of being able to print material for those learners who indicated that they didn't have the necessary access to digital. In addition to that, each one of our senior curriculum planners working with subject advisors developed on a weekly basis 2 sample lesson plans, which we considered to be COVID adapted. These lessons plans had the additional feature of providing tips for learners and tips for parents and tips for educators to be able to operate in COVID context. In the case of our FET program, there were detailed subject packages developed for every single subject, including revision material, and these were mediated with every single subject grouping in the FET band. We participated with the National Department on the additional programs that they mounted for learners and teachers on SABC TV as well as SABC Radio. Our colleagues ran the Afrikaans program on Radio Sonder Grense, and we contributed to 50% of the English lessons on Radio 2000. We initiated in the province our own partnership with Radio 786. So as we speak on a weekly basis on a Wednesday evening, we run an additional program. And we've also entered into a partnership with ITV on DSTV. Every Saturday morning, we run an additional program. For 2022, we're revising and reviewing the impact of all of this work, including telematics, which SG has mentioned, to see if we can strengthen the reach as well as the impact of the program. There is a discussion happening with National Department at the moment on any adjustments that need to be made to curriculum requirements and assessment requirements for 2022 plus. Decisions have not been taken as yet, and as soon as those decisions are taken, we will then pivot again our support package to the schools. But as we speak, all our teams are busy preparing on an end of year message to schools, as well as a start of year communication and program going further forward. On the issue of mathematics, so it is a complicated issue. We have identified the areas where there's a decline in the offering of pure maths. So Steenberg being an example, you've mentioned Menenberg as well. What we've also, so we're looking at why that has happened and what can be done. And then what we've also picked up is that a number of learners are choosing Maths Lit, because if they get a higher mark in Maths Lit, it's easier for them to get the bursary. Because if you get a lower mark in maths, then your university entrance is impacted. So we're just looking at the nitty-gritties of it, and then we'll make an adjustment to what is the best that can be done under the circumstances. Then if I can just maybe conclude with, in each of our districts, particularly this is now the FET, we have got evidence of our teams running programs on a daily basis. So in the afternoons, in the evenings, on weekends. As well as with holiday, we will continue that, obviously taking into account the fatigue issue that teachers and learners have raised as well. And we're placing a lot of focus on the question of learner agency, on getting and motivating our learners to take responsibility for their own learning, because in our estimate, if you don't do that, your inequality is still going to remain. And so in addition to all the work that the educators are doing, what can we do to support learners to become responsible for their learning and to equip and capacitate parents to play a greater role in their learning? Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mohammed. Could I ask Mr. Ilan? You can please deal with the questions on expenditure. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, SG. Thank you, Chairperson. I just want to make a general comment around the unexpenditure as far as education is concerned. I think that the Minister and the SG spoke about the challenge we had in this particular year. So what you have in education as cost drivers, you have number of learners. So learners is a cost driver for education department, and in the other case, sometimes you have secondary cost drivers, which got to do with number of days that you are at the school. So we generally have about 200 school days in a particular year. So when we speak about NSMP, then those things become applicable. So there is a number of factors that influence our ability to spend, especially with the filling of posts. So you have like a value chain where there's various parties involved, and then head office and districts also get involved later on. But if you have 2 months of hard lockdown, and then you have special arrangements in the education sector about how they should return to school, that has a domino effect on all your processes as you go forward. So for example, if there are principals supposed to be filled at special schools, the governing body gets involved there. If they're not at the school and they can't return to school, then we don't get those nominations. So what you then have is you have a build-up over time, because we issue about 3 vacancy lists a year. So then that impacts on your ability to fill those posts. Obviously, what we do in the meantime, we look for acting. We take, say, the deputy principal and make them act as a principal. But that causes a domino effect on the whole system with the build-up. And then you look at head office and districts with the ability to process those particular papers if it does come through. And there are DBSA requirements involved there in terms of, spacing and so forth, that, you have 50% people that can only return to work, whatever the case might be. So those things places limitations on administration also to process those things. So those are the challenges that we faced during this particular period. So if we say, but these are unvalid reasons, I'm just saying that there were circumstances that led to these things. And that's why we write what we write in the annual report around Program 4, or you can say that the same as far as Program 2 is concerned, public ordinance schools. It's the underlying reasons are the same. We could not fill those positions within due period, given that certain if you call it stakeholders involved, were not active during that particular period, and it does cause a kind of build-up. So if we go through the unexpenditure, and just to say to the member that asked the question, obviously our intention is not to surrender funding to Provincial Treasury. That's not the intention. However, there are circumstances that sometimes lead to those things, and it's unfortunate. And we do try to incorporate that into our planning for the following year to prevent the reoccurrence from happening. You would have also seen in some cases we've asked for rollover. So rollovers means that we have obviously placed an order, or we've got a commitment, a legal commitment to spend that funds. So the money is not lost. So it could in some cases mean the service provider has done the service, but we couldn't pay it on time at year end for various reasons. But we then ask for rollover. So a rollover is a legal commitment as far as that is concerned. So if we go to the unexpenditure on page 16, we also had to, just for the members' sake, we also had to spend money on PPEs or safety equipment. That was in the tune of about 452 million rand. We had to spend money there, and that had to come from part of that. Most of that had to come from our own budget. So we had to look for savings in terms of where we're not intending to spend that money anymore because of lockdown. We couldn't do training anymore, for example, because of social distancing, etc. There was just certain things we couldn't do, and we've had to redirect some of those funding to enable what they actually called the mask to supply learners with 2.2 million masks. We had to redirect that funding as well. So that is not always apparent in this particular unexpenditure as well. So the 44 million for equitable share, that part of that relating to what we call the grade 3 and 6, which Esty spoke about, which we couldn't do. So that money resulted in savings for us under a particular program. Then, as far as the second bullet is concerned, emergency expenditure for feeding, this province undertook because the NSNP didn't allow for feeding in a pandemic. We took a while to get DBE around to allow that. So this province set money aside to feed learners in that particular period, in a period of April and May, and the uptake was the uptake. Because we had the social distancing, not all the learners took part on that. So that was where the funding, the unexpenditure of 6.3 million rand came from. I think the total budget was about 80 million rand. So that's our own provincial treasury, and was for a good cause. As the AG said, we tried to feed learners during this particular course. We're the only province that did that. At national, there were some challenges there, legal challenges. However, that in that regard, this province was exempted from that. Then, if we talk about national program, you will see 6.9 million rand of that was committed. That was just, the service was delivered, but the payments couldn't happen before year end. So that service was delivered. So that's a legal rollover request, and that money would have been spent in this new financial year already. The other portion of that is because we had trips and because of the reduction in the number of school days that we could feed learners, it does result in savings. We can't, I think as a department, we pride ourselves not to involve in activity of fiscal dumping. But again, our main priority was to make sure that we feed learners, those that attend schools on a regular basis, because these are for poor learners. We have only quintile 1, 2, and 3, and in some cases quintile 4 learners as well, so that we could feed those learners. So from that perspective, the department dealt with its mandate in terms of the NSNP program. Then, as far as the mathematics and technology grant is concerned, there were, I think we can appreciate the fact that there were certain aspects there. So 18 million rand of that was committed, and we've applied for rollover in that regard. So it means that the service was delivered, but perhaps the payment couldn't happen before that time, or we've already placed the order. So we have a legal commitment in that regard as well. Then Mr. Lewis will talk just around the second bullet, about 9.9 million rand. And then I just want to talk about the 192 million rand around infrastructure. Our infrastructure budget for the period under review is 1.876 billion rand. We received this funding in adjustment budget for the fencing, mainly for the fencing and other things. Our implementing agent is Department of Transport and Public Works. For obvious various reasons, in terms of their particular value chain, they could not deliver on this particular service as well. But that is a commitment that we've then rolled forward into the new financial year as well. Then, National Department, as part of its reviving of the economy, with people having huge job losses, and I think we all know about the 350 rand allowance that now is it's a general trend in this country. With people, the high unemployment that resulted from COVID. So National gave us a budget of about 840 million rand for the Presidential Employment Initiative program. That mainly went into our schools. It's for youth, it's for people who have already left school, but it's for youth. And the idea was to employ them into our schools. The idea was that we employ those people into our schools, to assist schools with various aspects. One of that was to, I think we heard about the online learning, but one of those was to do with IT and try and assist learners as far as possible in that regard as well. The uptake wasn't the way we would like it to be. I think it was just under 19,000 learners that we took into the system, or not learners, youth. But in that particular case, because it's in allocation, we underspend on that. So our expenditure was in the region of about 67%. And the rest we are currently in discussion with Provincial Treasury around that as well, because it's the only way that National Treasury could get it to provinces was through earmark allocation, but it then forms part of the equitable share of a province. So we are currently in discussion with Provincial Treasury around the potential uses of that fund into the new financial year as well. So that's the discussions around that as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have, and members, we have given the reasons for what we think are valid reasons for the surrendering. But again, it was under very difficult circumstances that we had to operate, which did hamper the department in terms of dealing with its mandate per se. But I'll just now hand over to Mr. Lewis, if he can just deal with the learners with severe to profound intellectual disability grant. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Our Elspeth learners with severe to profound intellectual disability, are learners that's outside the formal schooling system. And for many years, these learners were the responsibility of the Department of Health and Social Development only. In 2010, there was a Cape High Court case that ruled, that the Education Department has got a role to play for the education of these learners. And the National Department of Education and our province were the two respondents. We were the only province as a respondent in the court case. And the court ruled, that all three departments should attend to these learners. Now, since 2010, nothing really happened on a national level to provide guidance. And what the province did and what we did in the education department was to be a little bit proactive. And we, under Ms. Daniels' leadership, developed our own mechanisms to deal with these learners to such an extent that we appointed about 20 teams to attend to these sectors that are community-based. 2 years ago, National Treasury then instituted a grant to deal with the Elspeth learners. That's many years down the line since, as a department, we tried to resolve this. The one difficulty in the outcome of DVE dealing with this was that they pegged the post levels, especially of one that the team leader, the chief psychologist, too high. We raised our concern with this because we indicated to DVE that pegging the salary scales there will create challenges to the Western Cape, seeing that we have appointed some of these teams already at scales within the context of the organization. That challenge has not been resolved. We are still busy with DVE dealing with that. But the result is that every year now for the last 2 years, there are some savings because the DORA prescribe that these chief psychologists need to be paid at a certain level, and it's going to create problems for us if we do not do it. And that's part of the reason where the savings derive from, as well as the difficult COVID year that we went through last year and couldn't deal with all the responsibilities of that category of learners. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Just the last question that I have to respond to. It's the issue around page 18 around irregular expenditure. Chairperson, we have, as you know, we make thousands of payments on a monthly basis. So what we have is we have an internal control unit that goes through on a sample basis, go through the batches, and then pick up matters around non-compliance as well. And we investigate that. We take it very seriously. The aspect around consequence management is part of this particular process, and we are currently busy with Provincial Treasury in the aspect around condonation in regard to some of these cases as well. Obviously, the AG is also party to that particular process as well at some extent. However, I must just say that the one aspect that I have difficulty with is the issue around the transport. where we have to transport learners in terms of either having to put additional learners on the bus or having to extend the contract, the distance to put learners onto that a bus as well. The time delay around SEM, which means you're going to have to go out and tender again, which takes you 3 months or 5 months if you're lucky. That to me is impractical. So in that regard, we have some challenges in that regard as far as contract extensions are concerned, which the AG regards in some cases as irregular. But again, Chairperson, just in terms of our process, we are in the process with Provincial Treasury as far as condemnation is concerned. Thank you.
Chairperson, before I'm back to just one perhaps additional thing, just in relation to the vaccinations. And maybe to just say in relation to the vaccinations, obviously, you of course all would know that we work on rotational learning that is costing our sector in a big way. So obviously one of the responses was, can we vaccinate? However, I think we're very conscious of the fact we cannot force anybody to be vaccinated. And in that particular case, Mr. Christians, it seems like the school organized something on their own behest, not at the department's behest. So essentially, our role is more about facilitation because people do have a choice. And I think that's where the law is at this stage. Thank you.
Chair, just two more things on the issue of the data. It's also what we also did do to try and make material more accessible online was to engage with the service providers, internet service providers. There was a gazette that came out from, I think, the Department of Communications, which we saw a gap in because it's referred to education purposes, and we did have some engagements with them, and as a result of that, quite a bit of our material was zero-rated on our portal as well. So that was also assisted a lot. And I believe Vodacom also provided 1,200 SIM cards for learners in Metro East as well. So that it did, we did do what we could to try and make connectivity and data more available to people who couldn't afford it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the responses. And members, Mr. Eli has given us responses on questions not yet asked in his response. So please, I hope you took note of that too, so that you don't repose the question. I'm going to give you an opportunity either to follow up on the initial question that you have asked or go to a second question. But it is a question. I'm just going to give you an opportunity to pose another question. Okay. Member Christians, Member Brinkhuis, Sayed, Allen, Bakamba Bocha, and Bosman. Okay, starting with you, Christians, Member Christians.
Thank you, Chair. Just, the HOD has now just said about its freedom of choice. I just want to know if you have a letter from a school to say that the school and the governing body has now made a decision to force learners to be vaccinated. And of course, if this thing goes to court, the education department will be taken to court for that matter. And as you know, we're busy fighting this matter in court. So that's why I want to be very clear that can schools and school governing bodies force pupils to come into school and say during school hours you will be forced to be vaccinated? And I've got the letter in front of me. So I just want it clear that do schools have this power to do this? And that's why my concern, people is running around and sending us letters, and I want to have clear when I communicate with the school. But I've also we've also written letters, but it's fine. I just wanted to hear from here. Can schools and SGBs, they says here the principal and it has now approved vaccination of children inside school.
That
was
HOD say, but I just want to listen, just hear, do they have that right to do that? And then just another question what Mr. Eli said about the 840 million presidential initiative program. Now, we know that people were employed for a short space of time, and most of those people that was employed is now again unemployed. If you say there's only 70% used, if we speak the same language, because it's about 252 million rand, if you say 70% has been used, why was that not used to employ? Because most of those youngsters is back on the street and they can't find a job. So why was that not used to empower those youngsters to assist our learners? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Christian. Member Brankhuis.
Thank you very much, Chair. And yes, Chair, I want to welcome the report by the department, and thank you very much also to the Minister. Chair, on page 9, in the forward of the Minister, as a government, we are committed to providing a quality education for every child. Now, exactly on that, Chair, through you, Chair, education for quality education for every child. I want to ask the Minister that how much priority will be given in the forthcoming year to the unplaced learners. We are looking at thousands of unplaced learners here in the Western Cape, and we are receiving a lot of complaints from a lot of areas. If I can just, what comes to mind, area like Peru, area like the Eastern Metro Strand area. We have received many complaints of unplaced learners, and I want to ask the Minister directly that how much priority will be given to this issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Member Said.
Chair, thank you very much. Mine is also on page 9, but it's a different question. I think Member Brankhuis has covered me on that one. Firstly, I want to commend the department for the focus on the grade 10 to 12 cohort in terms of learner retention. I think they've done well in that regard, but I just wanted to get a sense as to do we have concrete information around the dropout rates from grade 1 to grade 9? Because what we've been picking up, particularly in rural Western Cape, we've been receiving lots of complaints, lots of information about learners between those particular grades that are dropping out. We'd like to know what are the reasons for that, and does the department have a plan in place which speaks to that reality? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Member Allen.
Thank you so much. I also appreciate the 2 replies received earlier. I have one follow-up in terms of C and reports that were the reports. I do note that the Western Cape government, the education has made it available, but if the Minister can elaborate on some of the key learnings from those reports. And then I'm delighted to hear about the arts and STEAM Act, but I want to ask just briefly, how do we support female-led schools here in the Western Cape? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Member Makamba Bocha.
Chairperson, thank you very much. Mine is on the response by the Minister. I think the Minister's response is very reckless and irresponsible on the question whether the online learning via e-portal was accessible to everyone. So what I want to know, what exactly is she referring to when she says, for obvious reasons, not everyone would have access? So what I want to know is exactly who is eligible, who is not eligible to access these facilities when her own department has got 1.8 billion infrastructure budget that has not been utilized, when her department returns millions of rands to the National Treasury. So on earth, when are we going to ever deal with the issues of inequalities if we have ministers with such reckless statements when we're asking questions that are relevant? Thank you.
Thank you. Member Bosman.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chair, my question is around the school feeding scheme. I'd like to know what challenges were faced in the school feeding scheme during the pandemic, and how was this navigated to serve the basic needs and dignity of our learners? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. On page 12, in regard to looking at the future and it's going to look like post-COVID or part of the recovery, I'd just like to ask Minister HOD, in regard to learners coming into the academic year 2022, of that number, are there learners that have dropped out in 2020 or 21 academic year? If they are, what are the numbers? Do we know what the numbers are in those joining again now in the 2022 academic year? And then also, in regard to, as part of the new look to education, is platooning on the cards at all? Thank you. That's the round.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I think we need a bit more information about that vaccine. I'll leave my SG to deal with that. But I mean, people cannot be forced to be vaccinated. It's one thing approving that they may be. It's another thing, but SG can give a definitive answer on that. As Mr. Eli on the underspending about young people, there were conditions attached to that money, as far as I understand. Honourable Brinkhuis, how much priority is on unplaced learners? There's a huge priority placed on unplaced learners, as there is every year. You are aware that we've been, expounding on our problems as far as that's concerned for many years now, and the priority is such that I'm receiving a weekly report on the number of unplaced learners from the department. We also are having bi-weekly meetings with our provincial treasury as well to try and see what we can do to be proactive in this. But you also need to understand that it's in all likelihood next year, beginning of next year, we'll get a lot more people coming who aren't even on our list yet. So we are dealing with the ones that we know about. We, of course, are aware of many complaints of people not getting into schools. A lot of the complaints relate to not getting into their schools of choice, which we all need to understand is not, we can't give everyone their school of choice necessarily. Some people are very unhappy about that. I completely understand as a parent, but there's sometimes schools get 1,000 applications and they have 200 places. You just cannot get everybody into those schools. So, but the answer is it's receiving the highest priority. As far as grade 1 to 9, I'm not sure about those figures. I'll leave that to the department. Honourable Allen, the key learnings I think are different from each report, but there were some really interesting things from the COVID reports particularly. There's some incredibly innovative ways that schools have dealt with things like building a hand washing pipeline literally out of a piece of gutter. It's incredible. It doesn't cost a lot of money. It's schools that don't have a lot of money, but there really are some very good lessons to be learned from things like that. And then every other school is really quite unique. So I don't think there's a general lesson that can be learned. I think the general lesson that can be learned is that there is no excuse for bad teaching. And that's really what we are focusing on in the school evaluation reports. But there are a lot of very good things happening at most schools, and even schools that aren't rated as highly as others. There often are some very good points that they are highlighting in those reports. So I think it's very useful for even in your constituencies to go and have a look and see if any of the schools there have been assessed and what can be maybe what we can assist with as public representatives, also what communities can do. So I don't think there's one single, sort of necessarily a trend as such. But there is a trend in the COVID reports that there's some schools that have done incredibly innovative things to try and keep their schools going, keep learners at schools. Then, Honourable Makamba Botcha, female-led schools, I would hope we'd support them the same as male-led schools, but I'll leave that to my official. As far as this ongoing narrative of handing back millions of rands, my CFO has explained in quite a lot of detail as to what happened on each of those cases. It's not like you get an X amount of money and you can spend it how you like. A lot of that money that was sent back, all the money that was sent back to National Treasury are national conditional grants, and they are subject to specific requirements. You can't just spend it on whatever you feel like. So you can't take feeding scheme money and go and employ teachers, for example, unfortunately. There is other reasons for the equitable share money have been explained already by the SG. So it's not like in a system as big as this, you can't just suddenly decide today I'm going to spend 200 million on something else. It has to be very carefully planned. Very often tenders have to go out if it's infrastructure. So it's quite a complex environment. But believe me, I've questioned the department regularly on those issues. As far as school feeding, I'll leave that to the department, and also the dropout numbers for this year, for next year. Platooning is not on the cards as an ideal situation, Chairperson, because it has been shown in the past to be quite difficult. We have raised it as a possibility, particularly in poorer communities. It's often not safe. There are a lot of safety risks where people have to go to school different shifts, particularly the later shift. And also we need then a double supply of teachers. You can't expect our one teacher cohort to do two schools a day. And that's where we've had problems for quite some time now, is being able to appoint as many teachers as we would like to. So it's a very complicated, complex issue. And yeah, we have discussed it. I think Mr. Lewis, maybe you can also give a bit more on that. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Minister. We're going to follow up on some of the questions with a level of to make sure that we've covered everything that you have asked. I think just on the vaccination, maybe you can just, if I can suggest, Mr. Christian, just pass that correspondence onto me. Let me have a look at it. We'll look into it. Children cannot be forced. That's the headline. Okay, so that's on the vaccinations. I think then the other issue just is in relation to unplaced learners. The only perspective I want to add to what the Minister has already given. If you take a school like Spine Road High School in Mitchells Plain, just to understand what we're dealing with here, 200 places, but 1,200 applications for grade 8 learners. Now, if you multiply that, if you look at the whole system, clearly there are some schools, I particularly picked that one, Spine Road, but there are many others. Some of them are in poorer communities, some of them are in rich communities. There are schools of choice of parents, and all parents tend to apply to these same schools. That's one factor. Second factor is parents move around the province, but we can't move the place with them. The place is a fixed place. It's like I'm sitting in a desk here, this is the desk, it can't move the building. So now you've got a situation where you've got place, but it may not necessarily be in the right place that the parent wants. And ultimately, it's the parent who makes the application. And therefore, when the parent gets turned down, the parent is unhappy. Some parents have applied to 5, 6 schools and there was no place. Many of the schools that parents have applied to, there are schools of choice for everybody, with thousands of applications. I think that's just to put that perspective. But I want to make a commitment. The commitment that I want to make is we will place every learner. We will place them. We will find a way to offer that parent a place and say that's the place we actually have. System is finite, as you of course know. And we're looking at very many ways to deal with it, including one of the questions asked by the chairperson was about platooning. Clearly, it's not a desirable option, but if we get put into a corner, then it may be what we need to do. It's just that at this point, it's about our commitment to place for basic education, the learners that have applied. But again, because you put the choice in parents' hands, there's an oversubscription on a few. So I think that's just to make that point, I think, quite clear. So it's interesting we raise the question about the dropout rates, and Mr. Abrams can speak maybe a little bit more detail in relation to that. But in our measurement of the dropout rates, there hasn't been significant difference from, I'm going to say now, normal year to COVID year. Let me explain. In a normal year, dropout rate was about 1.9% of the learners. In the COVID year, it was 2.5%. Mr. Abrams can speak to the details. So we didn't see that, that great kind of, we thought perhaps it would be more, and the impression is it could be more. One of the reasons that there may be a perception of dropouts is because we are on rotational learning. Because we're on rotational learning, there will always be students at home. In any community. That's what you'll see. You see children at home. because of rotational learning. So it could be one of the perceptions. And then to relate that to the question asked by the chairperson on the academic 2022 year, whether the learners who have dropped out, and whether, I think we will not be able to answer that in this forum, and we'll have to write that down as a question and come back with a proper answer, because we'll have to then look at the individual basis. At this point, we've got the overall stats, 1.9% and the 2.5%. Then just to add on the question, Minister is correct. Obviously, we as far as our support to female-led schools, we give support to all our schools. We have, various principal associations, but we also, just in terms of the females in leadership, we also have an annual female management conference, and we also have a women in leadership course to be able to support that women in leadership in relation to that question. I would like to ask Mr. Lewis if you could please deal with, maybe supported by Dr. Naika, if you could deal with the question about the school feeding scheme and the pandemic challenges that occurred during that time. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Initially, with the first lockdown, level 5, there were understandably a hesitance on all levels. First, we had to struggle with our national department to understand whether we could use the grant for the purpose of feeding learners when schools are closed. With no response forthcoming, the provincial cabinet took a decision to grant some funding so that we could proceed with funding in the province. There were a little bit of fear amongst our schools, staff to open up schools and help and provide learners with food. And even after we have succeeded in getting our staff at schools and our volunteers to prepare food, there was also a hesitance amongst parents to send their children to school to go fetch the food. So it was a matter of a little bit of advocacy, and we thank everyone that contributed to encourage parents and our learners in our communities to go to school and to fetch the food. It was interesting during that first stage. You could see learners outside school standing 2 meters apart, waiting for food, etc., etc. However, when schools opened on the 1st of June, after about 2 months of being at home, there was another challenge because we had more children now at school, and with the institution of TREPS, temporary revised education plans, with only half of your children at school, it was also a difficulty for schools to start to understand how many food exactly per day they need to prepare, because we have allowed over and above for learners at school to receive food, for schools to make a little bit of extra food so that learners who are not at school could come to school during intervals and fetch food. We also made it possible that if your school is not, if your school and where you stay is not in the same community, that a learner could attend the closest or the nearest school to collect food. So those were part of the difficulties at the beginning, but as the process went on, schools could refine it. Also, the compliance to the COVID regulations, that was tight at the beginning, but our school management teams assisted well to get our volunteers to comply with those regulations of sanitizing, cleaning up, and so on. During December, as part of reaching out to most of our learners, because we knew there's a holiday now, food parcels were dispensed to most of our learners, especially in the rural communities. So overall, Chair and members, although difficult at the beginning, I think we made great strides in trying to give as many learners as possible food. We had 4,080 489,000 learners in the system, mostly quintile 1 to 3 schools, and here and there, because of historic reasons, quintile 4 and 5 learners are also included at about 1,010 schools that participating in this program. I think as we are at this stage, it's quite fluently, although we do not feed 100% of the learners because of TREP. Our figures indicate that we are feeding over a 2-day period about 80% of our learners. But then we must understand that the schools are not alternating only over 2 days. There are schools that alternate over 3 days and so on. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. That takes care of that round, members. It's 3 minutes before we break. I suggest that we break now. When we come back, if we could quickly speak to the impact of the vacancies during this period, SG, and what that was on the department for this reporting period. We shall start promptly at 10 to 11. Thanks. So I said until 10:30 we will deal with part A of the annual report, pages 5 to 26, and members have had an opportunity to do their follow-up questions on the responses that we have had. I asked the SG before we broke that he just speaks to the impact of the vacancies that we have had during this reporting period. SG?
Chairperson, can you be just seeking some clarity quickly on your question? It's your question about teacher vacancies. Can you just...
On page 24 and 25, your organizational structure, there are a few vacancies there. So my question therefore then is the impact that that has had on the department, if it had any, during this reporting period. Thanks.
Chairperson, I can safely say that it didn't have that kind of impact that I can say is negative for the department, because essentially in all of those positions where there are vacancies, there would have been people acting. And as we go into the next financial year, which is not what we're here for today, but many of these posts have actually been filled on a permanent basis. For example, Deputy Director, Curriculum and Assessment Management, Deputy Director General, that is, Mr. Mohammed has been appointed, and he's here. Director Assessment Management, it's Exams and Assessment, that has been filled. We just made an announcement in relation to that. Cape Teaching and Learning Institute, that has been filled. And Employee Relations, we're in the process of filling at the moment. The Director Strategic People Management, that has also been filled. Director Metro Central Education District, that's been advertised and in the process of being filled. So,
thank you very much, SG. Members, I'm going to then now move on to page 27 up until page 142. I'm going to ask you to please be cognizant of the time. I think for this section, we can go on until about 25 to 12. That includes now posing the questions as well as the responses from the department, and thereafter we will get to part D in order for us to stop at 12:15 to give opportunity to those that have indicated they want to ask a question on the AR, those that are community members who's joining us online. Okay, so I am then at starting on page 129. I'm taking 29, 30 and 31. If you have any questions on those pages, Member Christians, I note you.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, thank you, Chairperson. Just on page 29, I always ask this question because I know it's got a massive impact when we have the immigration of learners and we don't have the funding. And that I usually ask that because it's got a huge impact on the quality of education that you can render. So how does the department mitigate this with, we know that we are receiving something like 18 to 22,000 learners every year, and we already have overcrowded classes and so on. So the question just is just how does the department, and I know the minister has spoken about it many times, but it stays an ongoing concern. And then just on the same page, also we know now schools are struggling with school fees, as said in the last paragraph. So the write-off of school fees is most probably also a big thing now. When we, Chairperson, you can remember when we visited schools, a big number of learners is not paying school fees. So that also impact on the quality, because also SGP Post is no longer there. So it's just that question. I'm talking about the quality of education that we are rendering to our learners. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. Any other questions? Member Said.
Chair, thank you very much. My question is on page 30 from paragraph 4, the second sentence. There's a discussion around the teacher to learner ratio. I just wanted to know what is the average ratio in schools from quintile 1 to 3, especially those in the relatively poorer communities? And are these schools, the second part of the question was, are there schools in the province that have got a average that is below this, and what are the plans to ensure that all our schools are used to the maximum capacity, particularly given the point that was made by the SG earlier in response to Member Bryn's case about the fact that parents want to choose where they want to go to, or where they want to send the learners to, and then certain schools remain, having, they remain having vacant spaces while there's a clamoring for certain other schools. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Members, I'm reminding you the annual report. I'm just putting that refrain to you. Member Allen, and then I note members Bosman and Bakamba Pocha.
Thank you so much, Chairperson. HOD, in terms of pages, I will jump between pages 61 and 97. One of the outcomes in terms of quality education is more learners are retained in the education system. But then on 97, there's reference to an increase in the number of learners placed by the department. Is the department able to elaborate or expand on, especially in a pandemic recovery period where families are facing hardships, how will the department continue to achieve those outcomes in terms of placing the learners, but also ensuring that the quality education outcomes are met? Thank you.
Thank you, Member. Alan is in a hurry to finish up. He's ahead of us, but I'm going to let those questions stand. That's fine. Member Bosman.
Chairperson, thank you. I just want to check, so are we allowed to ask questions from pages 27 to 129?
For now, on 29, 30 and 31.
Okay, then I'll wait for the next round then. Thanks, Chairperson.
Member Allen had his light bulb now. Member Bakamba Pocha.
Chair, I'll wait for the next round. My questions are starting from page 32. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Minister HOD.
Thank you very much for the questions. I think just to say, how does the department mitigate in relation to overcrowded classes, that question. I want to be able to say that what we have done, our response has been to try and obviously open new schools where we can. So that's one response. Other response has been to look at the question of providing mobiles to schools to expand, because that's a quick response. The third thing that we've also done is we tried to mitigate some of this by appointing teachers, releasing from our basket of posts. We've released more teachers into the system. From 2019 into 2020 into 2021, we kept that the basket the same. And then in 2021, we've taken a decision to actually increase the basket. I think it's 590 posts. My colleague can correct me if I have the number wrong. Then to release that into the system, it also allows you to be able to actually just accommodate more learners. On the question on school fees and norms and standards, I'm going to ask Mr. Ila and somebody from his team perhaps to answer that, just in relation to the question of school fees and how are we rendering the service in relation to the fact of people not, maybe just the process also in terms of, Mr. Ila, if your team could deal with that, the process that is followed, just in terms of people not being able to pay school fees. Is there anybody who can answer Mr. Sayed's question? We asked about the teacher to learner ratio average between Q1 to Q3. If no one has the answer at the fingertips right now, is there someone who can answer that? No, okay, you can prepare yourself for that answer. That's fine. And then I think, so, you know, it's just, let me just talk a little bit about the question of quality education and what this is. It's in our vision statement, okay, which means we do everything to be able to get there and to get to where we need to be in terms of the vision. We've got a system, if you go around the world and you look at the education system, it does reflect the inequality, every country of the world. The education system will reflect the inequality. So some of these questions you're asking, they're actually about how to change South Africa. Because many of these changes that we have to put in terms of the inputs, they come about in relation to what are the constraints that we have as a department. Constraints that we have, the areas, the ability of parents to pay and let's say cross-subsidize and so on, it's not always there. So therefore the state has to stand and make sure that it can give quality education. We also have seen in our system retention of our learners at a high number. COVID-19 mentioned that, a little bit of a bubble there, but not much. We've also seen the increase in the provision of basic education over time and structural difficulties that brings, because if you look at when the system was first designed, you'd have many primary schools and few high schools, and then you push everybody through the primary schools and you get some bottlenecks into the high schools because obviously you don't have enough. So there's a big build program, especially in relation to the high schools. Yeah, I think that's sort of answered. If you can just follow up, please, Mr. Eli and Mr. Kronya. Please, Mr. Eli and Mr. Kronya. Thank you.
The aspect that we also do is we do compensation for no fee exemptions. So where learners can apply that can't pay school fees in certain schools or fee-paying schools, they can apply to the department via the school as well. In some cases, we've seen some of the parents are reluctant to go that route, but that's what we encourage. So that's about 68.8 million rand that we spend in that regard. Then we have other aspects where some of our schools are below the no fee threshold, and for that we spend 4.4 million rand. Then we have additional to Quinta 1, 2, and 3. We have additional no fee schools, about over 200 schools as well, and there we spend 303 million rand just around making those additional schools in Quinta 4 and 5 no fee as well. And then where schools struggle with municipal fees, we put funding aside for that as well. So that's 65 million rand that we budget for that, and so forth. So Chairperson, and then as far as the Presidential Employment Initiative is concerned, part of that funding was also to save posts as well, for SGB posts as well. Now, what I've got to say earlier, Chair, that we actually didn't have a very good response in that. And that was part of the savings we had also, that we had to get back to Treasury as well, because those funding was there to save some of those posts during that particular period as well. So there we also had savings in that regard as well. Then the aspect around the question about school fees, it's a difficult topic. Let me say that I think in some cases we have to look and see what drives that school fees. In some cases, very high school fees gets driven by STB posts as well, where schools have their own post as well. And then we also have this phenomena that the schools try to keep the school fees high as well. And we advise them, in some cases, to lower their school fees, to make it more affordable for parents. Then we also have a process where, through the ministry, that school fees can appeal to us as far as their quintile status is concerned, or they can become a no-fee school. So we had, for the past number of years, we had very few of those schools actually writing to us. And that appeal goes to the minister, and with obviously recommendation from the department. In some cases, what we see in most cases, they actually can afford. It's more beneficial for them, put it that way, to remain a fee-paying school. It's just in some cases their school fees are slightly higher than what parents can afford. And in some cases, parents don't want to also apply for the fee exemption as well. So for the period under review, which is the year that we're looking at, we had about 8 schools that wrote to us for no fee status and quintile status. What we normally advise schools is not to, because we can't change the quintile status because we already got quintile 1, 2, and 3. Because the difficulty there is we can't move any of those schools out of that quintile either. So what we normally encourage schools to do is to apply for no fee status. And again, like for the last year, 2021, this particular financial period we're looking at, we had about 8 schools writing to us, and then 3 of them were approved in that regard to be no fees schools. So remember, Christians, we do go through a process to try and deal with those aspects as well. I think there are a couple of variables in that space. I've tried to point it out as well, but I think the aspect around financial management at school level also becomes important. How they spend money on and what they spend money on as well. Those things we also have to give attention to. But generally, my point was at the beginning, generally we do find parents not be able to pay school fees because of unemployment and those reasons, but there is an avenue for that, where they can write to the governing body through the school principal and appeal to the department to be part of the fee exemption and so forth. The challenge that schools have with that is it's obviously retrospective. But again, we have other mechanisms where we try to assist schools as well. We even try to assist schools with textbooks as well, where a school writes to us and says, look, I can't afford to buy textbooks for these learners. And there's a process for that as well. We've got what we call a growth budget for learner support materials, where they can actually write to the department and we can assist in that regard as well. But our focus generally when it comes to financial support to schools, it's around education aspects. That's the main focus as far as that is concerned. So if they can't pay them civil services, if they can't buy textbooks, whatever, they have to appeal to the department for assistance in that regard as well. Chair, I'm not sure if I've covered all of that, but I think we have to be aware of the fact that during the lockdown, some schools were severely impacted and they already lost some of their STB posts. But when the initiative came forth, we tried to save as most of those STB posts. We tried to save, but there's a process that we had to go through. We did find in some cases schools are naughty because they didn't want to let us know how many actual posts they have, because that's not the information that we normally have in the system. Some schools are really reluctant to share that information with us, but then we could then assist in during that particular period as well. I'm not sure if Mr. Cronje will be able to deal with the issue around learner-teacher ratios, but just to say in terms of process that we go through every year and that we consult with the SG and the minister, we look at quintile 1, 2, and 3. We actually look at all the quintiles, but we especially focus on quintile 1, 2, and 3 as well, around their learner-educator ratios as well. to see how we can address that. I just want to say that the learner educator ratio is a difficult one, because what could be for the system and what could be for the school, it depends on how that school manages its timetable and the availability of physical infrastructure there as well. So what becomes apparent from a systemic perspective, say the school's got a learner educator ratio of 1:35, and in some classes you will find there's 40 kids or 50 kids in the class, but that's because of either timetabling or how that particular physical infrastructure of that school work, or the availability of that as well. That becomes, in some cases, a limitation. But I'm not sure if Mr. Matthys is able to respond to the quintile 1, 2, and 3 question. Thank you.
Chair, thank you. Just with regard to the ratios, we've got a more of a detailed summary or indication, but I'll just maybe summarize that. If one looks at your quintiles 1 to 3, we look at averages in terms of ratios below 30, and then next 3 categories basically below 39, and then 1 is 40 and above. And if you look at the quintile 1 to 3 schools, basically 24% of them find themselves below the category of 1:30, with the majority then in the ranges between 30 and 39, as opposed to your fee-paying schools, because the picture there is quite different. But we have the detailed information around that.
Thank you very much. Members and department, I'm just raising a concern here in regard to time and the responses to the questions posed. Now, I don't want to water it down at all. I want you to respond, with as much information as possible. What I want to say, and I earlier said I want to interrupt myself. I earlier went now page by page, but if I look at time, we are not going to make it. But that also means that members, we have to work together. That we now have to ask our absolute most important questions that we have prepped in regard to this AR. Otherwise, we are not going to make it, and therefore I'm also then saying members needs to then use their other privileges in posing questions around this AR, because we are not going to get through. I am adding 15 minutes to this section and then cutting 15 minutes on the human resource part. But I'm still with the directive that we are not going to come back after Skipper. Okay, so please just work with me. I am now with you, Member Said. Therefore, saying, please pose your questions in regard to this section. Pages 29, where we started, to 142. And for that, I'm going to give each member a round of 2 questions, if you have not asked. Okay? All right. Starting with you. You're not start. Okay. All right. Member Allen, you have asked your questions. Member Bosman.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chair, for me, the question is on page 69, where the department appears to do very well in collaboration with independent bodies and schools. Can they perhaps elaborate on what are the main lessons learned there, and how does that apply to public-private partnerships in general going forward? And then on page 109, under program 5, I note that there's an overachievement in the assessment of suitability for grade R. There's also been sort of very general, strong showing by the department in grade R. How does this set the tone for the transfer of early childhood development as a program from DSD to the WCED next year, if at all? And then can I get another one, Chair?
You may use the liberty, Member Bosman.
Thank you very much. Page 123 on program 7. I note there that tangible education outcome of the commitment toward quality education for all is set already, and the target for the number of distinctions achieved by learners was realized by over 1,600 of the original target. Can the department perhaps elaborate on what resources help the department make that possible? And are we seeing strong signs of resilience from the learners in this regard? Thanks, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Member Bosman. Member Bakamba Bocha.
Thank you, Chair. My first question is on page 32 on the table titled "Number of Learners Benefiting from Social Supporting Initiatives." At the bottom of the table, it says the learners benefiting from fee exemption. So what I want to know from the department, which learners are exempted from paying fees and what criteria is used for this? And also, what is the difference between these learners and those benefiting from the no fee policy? And number two, at the bottom of page 42, does the table there mean that the department was only able to erect 29 high security perimeters fencing for the period of 2020-2021? And then if so, why so few fences were created in the entire province where safety of learners is an issue of an ongoing concern? Lastly, on page 44, on the table titled Post Allocation for 2011 to 2021, in the period of 2020 to 2021, the number of posts allocated does not change at 33,864. So why is that? So does this mean that there were no post allocation in 2021 or the teachers were appointed after March 2021? My last question, Chairperson, is on the page 66. There's a table there titled Western Cape NSC results since 2010. Chairperson, am I still audible? Oh, good.
Yes, you are. You are.
Oh, okay, so okay, on page 66, as I said, under the heading NCS results since 2010, the number of table there shows that the pass rate percentage experienced a drastic decrease in the period between 2016 and 2020. I've got two last questions, Chairperson. I'm not sure if you can allow me, but continuing on page 66, what contributed to the NSC pass rate of decrease from 86% into 79% in 2020? I don't want the department to hide behind the COVID pandemic because the pass rate percentage has been dropping over the years since 2016, where there was no COVID. For an example, 86% pass rate was achieved in 2016, then followed by 82.8 in 2017, then followed by 81.5 in 2018. So if one follows this decline trend, irrespective of the COVID-19, the decline in the pass rate for 2020 was expected. And I want to know what causes this decline. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I would just want to check with the members in the chamber in regard to questions posed. Member Christians.
Thank you, Chairperson. And, you know, it's difficult to just look at certain questions because it becomes watered down. You don't know what to ask and what is more important than something else. So
but we're working together as a team now.
I know we're working together as a team, but it's difficult. It's extremely difficult. I don't even know what to ask, but let me just say this. The question I've asked about the mitigation. And specifically on school fees, because what the schools do, they use their norms and standards to pay for municipal bills and all the other things. And the school, you know how we visited that. And that's why the question, because they are far behind with the municipal accounts. And this committee already said we must really look at that. How can we help and assist even schools now when it comes to paying the municipal bills, because they're not getting school fees, and that is the question. Because I'm just trying to make it easier, because I don't want to put more pressure on the parent. Because although I actually wanted to say this, is it a myth that we get a no-fee school? Because parents are given stationery to buy and stuff, and you know they need to come, and maybe it's the school not asking the department, but there's pressure on our parents that's unemployed to get stationery and all of those type of things. And I can tell you sad stories. And that's why I'm asking that question, because I know what I'm asking is we cannot put more pressure on our parents that cannot afford to pay school fees. And that's why the question. So it's also, I'm covering for the school because they also need to play a role. And how do we mitigate that? Maybe just another question. There's something of, I know that Minister I've always asked this question, how far are we with collaboration schools? You know, that was a smart idea and people didn't buy into it, because I believe this will also assist our education department with partnering with people and getting people on board with collaboration schools, because you know, the government coffers is only so much, and what do we do differently? Because ultimately, as department, you stand for quality education. I believe that is very, very important to that. So, Chair, I'm going to park it there for the moment because of time, but I don't know what is more important than the other. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Everything is important, but time is against us, so we have to manage it in that regard. Member Syed.
Chair, thank you very much. And I also echo Mr. Christian's sentiments, but it's fine. I think at least members have been covering each other, and I've been covered by Member Christians, but following up from his, just a slight addition, and Mr. Mayor will know this because I've been raising these issues with him during the year, actually, earlier in the year. The charging of textbooks, schools charging learners for textbooks, including no-fee schools doing that. And there have been those cases reported. The department has dealt with some of them, but do we have maybe a way forward for the upcoming year to mitigate against that? Just that. Then on page 100, around the issue of the psychosocial support task team that was established during the COVID-19 lockdown. And I know, and the issues also go beyond COVID. If you look at the social circumstances, I just wanted to get a sense, what is the psychologist to learner ratio per district, and what are the plans to possibly increase the amount of psychologists, and also where you've got cases as a school that we visited, I think in the Winelands, Chair, where a school is not necessarily happy with the quality of service they're getting from a psychologist. What kind of recourse do schools have, and how do we address that? Then my last question, topic that I've always been raising, page 114. The issue, there's a point there about the number of schools in high priority areas that are provided with high security perimeter fencing. 8 schools there. I just want to know what are the details of those of those 8 schools who received it, and why did the department? Is there any reason as to why the department missed the target of the 30 schools as per the Premier's commitment? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Member Brancos, your page.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, on page 31, dedicated, hardworking officials and teachers remains the department's biggest asset. I receive numerous complaints from many schools, especially in the Metro East area, whereby learners have complained they are not, the school doesn't offer certain sports codes. If that is the department's biggest asset, our teachers and our hardworking officials, I would like to ascertain that why is the case that certain sports codes are not offered at these, especially primary schools. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Not a question. It's not a question. It's just in case the Ministry Department think I'm not reading the report. The collaborating schools is 69, but I've got the information there. So it's still on a pilot. It's 2015, and you know it's not the progression that we expected. So I did the report. So I'm not asking those answers. Thank you.
Thank you very much for clarifying. Member Allen, is there other questions that you would want to pose? Okay, there is not. Minister, HOD.
Yeah, thank you, Chairperson. I just want to take, I think, 2 questions that were more for myself. The first one is the collaboration schools issue. Yes, I agree. It would have been nicer to have more, but it is quite a complex environment. As you know, we had to pass legislation. The legislation still is being taken to court. So I think one of the crucial aspects of a collaboration school is the operating partner. And we haven't had a wealth of operating partners available to be able to come on board. And I think the fact that it still is in court and being challenged is partly contributing to that, because people, I certainly would want to start a business, essentially, if you're not sure whether you're going to be able to continue with it. So I think that's one of the issues. But also we've learned a lot of lessons. I mean, some schools have been hugely successful, others we've had some difficulties. And also, COVID has also, I think, affected additional funding. But it's not. We mustn't forget that collaboration schools, we still fund them as a government school. The way of operating them is different, and there is some additional funding given by the funders, but we still have to fund them as a school. So it's not like sort of a separate thing that's going to assist. Having said that, we are busy with other partnerships. We've got a very exciting one coming, I think, beginning of next year, if all is on track, and it'll be a technical school, not in the metro. So I'm quite excited about that. And also the other school, the thing that's really giving impetus to that is the Barneyvale model, where the community really just took that model and ran with it. So there certainly are possibilities, but it's not a panacea for all ills. The second thing I just want to raise is, we, as you can hear, are doing a lot for people who are struggling, but you must also understand we're also struggling. And the more things we are demanding of the department, the thinner our budget has to go. Now we want more psychologists. I mean, we want more teachers, we want more classrooms. So there's pressure somewhere. If it's not on the parents, it's on the department. So we must just also bear that in mind, because we are in a really, really difficult financial situation. I'm sure you all heard the MTBPS the other day, and they're referring now to reductions in the equitable share. So that is a danger for us. I think, was there another one I had to? I think that's all I needed to say specifically. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. Maybe I can try and deal with a few, and then my colleagues are going to help me with some of them. If I could ask Mr. Gilay, we can just talk about the criteria for fee exemptions. Mr. Abrams, can you deal with the fencing question, please? There were 2 questions on the fencing. 8 to 4, we said 30, but there's only 8. That's one aspect. And the other one, can you also deal with, somebody asked why there's so few fences. We can deal with that. So let me just try and answer the question on ECD and say that clearly there's an attempt to link up the whole value chain in relation to education. What we've done so far is the Premier has hosted a summit with the our Minister and the Minister of DSD. We met with the sector in relation to ECD and spoke about the fact that we will be taking over that function as is from DCD, at least for a period of 2 years. And the reason for that is because we need to understand the modality of how they operate. We are working with schools. There are finite units. There's 1,518 of them. They're well defined. We control the staff. We control the rules. We have circulars, as you of course know, highly structured system. In ECD, there's many different formats of ECD. And they work a lot with NGOs, which is not the experience of the education department. So that's expertise we're starting to develop, so therefore we keep everything the same. But I think there is an attempt to link up. But I think just to put a little bit of caution on my enthusiasm, to say, even at the basic level, when discussing various things inside, the Minister just alluded it now in Minister's comments. I think the system is asking a lot of the sector. Because even at the basic level, just to provide the average, we have difficulty because of the question of resources. Now it makes sense to add the ECD on, but you also need to then make sure that in the end you can actually connect up what your base, which is what you're actually supposed to be doing, and do that properly. So I think that's just a constraint that we face. I think on the question of the pass rate, if I may just address that, the 86% is actually an outlier. If you look at the table overall, you do a analysis of it, a regression analysis, you will see that 86% is the outlier for that year. I wasn't here in 2016. I don't really know why it was 86%, but if you see then the others are like 82, 81, that should have been where it should be. And I think we We were obviously disappointed that we didn't get the 80% last year, but that's essentially, if you look at the norm, that's probably more of a norm as to where that went. Now, there was a question about what inputs we have put in relation to grade 12. If Mr. Mohammed can perhaps just prepare himself to answer that question as well, just to add to that answer, Mr. Mohammed, as well. And if Mr. Meyer can answer the question on charging learners for textbooks, we can just look at that question. Ms. Daniels, can you answer the question on the psychologist to learner ratio? And then I think just on the question of the sport codes, which is the one that hasn't been dealt with. The thing about the sport codes is that, remember, essentially we're working with a partner department as well, which is DCAS, to assist the department in relation to extramural activities, and the directions have banned many sports and have only recently, in fact, been opened, and now we're in exam time right now. So essentially, we're not encouraging a lot of extramural, because obviously we're in the exam period and we need to do with academic work. But I think the point is taken. Clearly, we do want a rounded education for all our children, and therefore sport codes should be inside those schools. And that's something I think also, just to say from my point of view, you will have a champion for that, sir, for that question, because that's obviously my own background as well. So if we can answer those, I think the one that I did leave out was Mr. Christian's comments about school fees and that the schools are behind with municipal accounts. Mr. Ila, maybe you can just assist with that answer. He says the no-fee school is a myth. Maybe you can just either debunk or agree whether that's true. Please, if you can answer this. I think that's covered. If you can go perhaps in that order, first Mr. Eli, then we can do Mr. Abrams, Mr. Meyer, and Mr. Mohammed, and then Ms. Daniels. I think that's it for now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, SG. Just the issue around the criteria for fee exemption. When this first start off, Chair, if you don't mind, I know I'm giving a long explanation, Chair, but I think it's important we understand how the system actually operates. When you're a no-fee school, you've actually given up, the SGP has given up their right to charge school fees. Okay, so they can't charge you anything. They can ask parents for donations, but they can't charge school fees. So basically, it leaves your fee-paying schools that can then request fee exemption. They the schools that and their learners that qualify for fee exemption. Those are the only ones. You can't go to, again, as I said, no fee schools can't charge school fees. They can request donations from parents, etc. Then, Chairperson, the issue around the post allocation hasn't changed. At that stage, Chair, when we concluded on that process, Provincial Treasury was in the process of asking departments to cut their budgets already. So we had to, in the absence of any other indications, we decided as a department to go to the conservative route and keep our basket the same, because we knew we were going to cause disruption in the system by now trying to also cut the basket. Once the matter became more clearer with our Provincial Treasury in terms of indicative allocations, we've allocated actually 519 posts for that year to try and deal with the pressure on the system as well. So while it's that was the official position at that stage, but subsequently it is changed as well. Then as far as arrear municipality service is concerned and the pressure on parents, which I do understand, I just want to say that the no-fee schools is not a myth. It's a national policy we have to comply with. And again, we have documentary evidence that schools are classified as no-fee schools. And that we publish, that list we publish as well in the Gazette as well. So it's not a myth. What does become an issue is how the school deals with their funding. So schools currently gets allocated, I think, about 1,600 Rand per learner per year. So if you're in a school of over 1,000 learners, you can actually work out how much they will receive in revenue for the year. How they deal with the aspects around buying textbooks and the financial management of schools, that becomes the concern, and the choices they make, that becomes the concern. So when it comes to municipal services, we put a budget aside for 6,500 Rand a year to deal with that. Now, the record shows because I see those schools as well. And when we help out schools, we ask the schools to please manage their municipal services. So the big ticket items there for municipal services is basically electricity, but to a large extent is water and the sewage that goes together with that. Your sewage comes about 60% of your water bill. So if you are using a lot of water, your sewage drives that bill up almost immediately. Despite the fact that we had embarked on the process of trying to minimize the issue around water and putting water meters in there, we find in some of our schools the bills still remain high. And that needs to be investigated because in some cases there are possibly maintenance issues, but again, it's also how the school manages their own bills as well. But for the year under review, the 6,500 Rand was spent on the following. In terms of municipalities, we spent for the City of Cape Town, 107 schools we helped out there. So that's basically schools in the metro. And then for rural municipalities, there was 80 schools we assist in that regard. Then the department has this anomaly where we have some schools that directly link to ESCOM. And they are 145 schools that we helped out, but those are various municipalities that we assisted in that regard as well. So we really try to take the pressure off. But if I can just share with you, my challenge is there are some schools that is not bringing their part. We are forever helping out the same schools, and they crowd out the other schools that's really in need. There's just some schools that just don't give their cooperation. And we have asked the districts to really look at those schools in terms of the financial management aspects. I don't have to say anything more around that in terms of behavior as well. Yeah, thank you.
Chair, I'll answer the questions on the fencing. Allow me to share, we're reporting on page 114 that relative to the adjusted plan target of 27, we've actually overachieved in delivering 29 fences, and I'll explain in a moment. The 3 were characterized by both very volatile situations. We had an issue on the ground at those 3 schools. We adjusted the target down to 27. So PPI 601 and 602 should be read together. The original plan was 30. We adjusted that to 27. And in the year under review, we delivered 29 fences. So that's 2 over the adjusted. We had, under those conditions, Chairperson, we had in fact delivered 35 in total, with 6 ad hoc requests as well. And I make that point coming back to the Honourable Member's question on page 42, why only 30 given the challenge? So I'm saying 2 things. Firstly, 29 over the 27 that was adjusted in our plan, and then a further 6 takes us to 35. On page 42, in the context of improving the perimeter security at our schools, we had defined a list of 150 schools we thought were in high-risk areas. Dividing that by 5 years, the annual target, and we named these schools in advance, we would deliver 30 per year. And so the 29 should be seen in the context of that 30 that was very specifically commissioned under that program. And I'm saying, notwithstanding, we would have identified another 6 that we're adding, but not reporting under this particular parameter. Hope that clarifies. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. And thank you for the question, Member Said. Yes, we have discussed it on a number of occasions. The challenge is at the school level where a principal and the governing body is also trying to mitigate against potential losses at the school. So it's not as much as, the learner paying for the textbook. It is in some way, as to how does the school ensure that the books come back at the end of the year. So in most instances, it is a deposit that learners pay. And at the end of the year, it sort of becomes a deposit again for the next year. And technically, when the learner leaves at the exit grade, that the money should be paid back to the parent. So that is the kind of thinking that schools have taken on board. It is a massive challenge. The number of textbooks, and I'm sure in your visits to schools you have seen the condition of textbooks as well. And so it is an attempt by schools, in terms of wanting to ensure that if we need to, urgently replace a textbook, that at least there would be some capital within the school to be able to accommodate for that as well. So that is really, the practice. We do not encourage learners to pay for textbooks, as I've indicated to members, also in written communication to principals. It's not allowed. But, that is the only reason why there is a cost attached, to textbooks within the schools. Thanks.
Chairperson, thank you for the question. I think that during this COVID period, each and every one of us has had an experience of psychosocial effects of the pandemic. Or if not yourself, then members of your family or your friends. But I think that not all of the people who experience psychosocial effects need to see a psychologist necessarily. I want to start off with that. So when we formed the task team, the psychosocial task team, during hard lockdown, we put our heads together as psychologists and social workers in the department and said, how are we going to deal with the overwhelming numbers that are going to show some effects? And what we have done is to say who needs low-level support in the classroom, who needs to come into a support group, maybe you call that moderate-level support, and who needs individual psychosocial support. So I just want to tell you what came out of our discussions. We were also fortunate that we could learn from other countries, best practice in other countries. And so we've put a lot of interventions from international good practice and from our own. So that is what we've done. We've roped in people who perhaps didn't work together so closely before. So for example, we work with our life orientation, our life skills teachers, so that they can implement in the classroom with NGOs, with other government departments, health and social development. So that is the context in which I'm going to give you an answer to how many psychologists. So we have 64 psychologists and 64 social workers in the province, and that is one social worker and one psychologist per circuit. Circuits are between 20 and 25 schools, and I would be estimating now about plus minus 15,000 to 20,000 learners. And then we also have, based at a school, 165 care and support assistants at our schools with high need, and they are trained in lay counselling. And they're also trained as to when to refer, so they can deal with low levels. So I think just to give you that context, we also work with, because if teachers are feeling more at ease, then the learners also benefit from that. So we work very closely with our strategic people management colleagues with the employee wellness program. Sometimes we run workshops for teachers to relieve their stress, but sometimes we also work with Metropolitan Health, who is the service provider. I'd be very happy to answer any follow-up questions. I'm glad that psychosocial support and well-being is on the radar. I think we all benefit from it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. So the question is around the declining NSC performance. The table on page 42 shows that we did have declines in between 2016, 2017, and then 2018, but then we showed an upward trend. And then the decline from 2019 to 2020, I think, is understandable. We can provide detailed analysis if required, but what we have identified is that in the province, majority of our learners take English and Afrikaans as home language. And if you compare the pass rates between our languages and the home language users in the other provinces, our percentage is lower. So we've started a process of engaging with those schools where learners can take their home language as the home language. We think we'll be able to turn that around. We've also identified the subjects where there's fluctuating performance, and we've also identified schools which require more support in order for the pass rates to go up. We can provide written responses if required with detailed analysis. Thanks.
Thank you very much. That was the round of questions. Members, that was your responses to your round of questions posed. With your indulgence, Member Christians, I'm going to move on to the HR section. And I am tabling for you pages 167 to page 208. I'm so glad I do. So I'm taking your questions on those pages. Member Christians, I'm starting with you. I'm going to do the chamber, members Bosman and Makamba Bocha, and then I will come to you. So Member Christians.
Thank you, Chair. Just I see this page 202 about the types of misconduct, and there's quite a big number on assault and attempt to threaten assault. So that's maybe concerning is 30% of the cases, and the others is not so much. I don't know. And then, of course, the one that we always struggle with is absenteeism. So question is what measures are put in place in order to mitigate that. Just I don't know where we find it, because there was quite something in the paper about the previous HOD being contracted to work, and I'm trying to find that. If we can just get some explanation on that, why the previous HOD was contracted to work for the department, and is that contract not done? That's my two, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you to sticking to the discipline. Member Brankhuis.
Repeat it, Chair. I'm covered, Chair. Thank you.
Member Syed.
Chair, thank you very much. I think I just wanted to know page 185, tables 3.5.33, age groups of staff who resigned. I just wanted to get a sense as to what do we attribute to so many resignations. I just wanted to get a sense of that, and then how do we basically address that? That's my first question. Then page 203, table 3.12.4, on the grievances logged for the period of 1st April to 31st of March. I just wanted to get a sense as to why are the grievances not resolved, and do we have any progress in that regard? And if we could get a sense as to an idea of the nature of the grievances. Thank you, Chair.
Is that it for you, or do you want to ask another one?
Okay, do I get more than two?
I'm giving you,
okay.
You can ask another one.
Oh, okay, okay, wonderful.
Take it while you can.
Okay, the last one then is on page, I have to choose which one now. Okay, page 178. I just want to get a sense there. There's table 3.3.3 on the filling of the SMS posts. I just wanted to get a sense, is there a difficulty or a challenge in filling these posts? And what is the challenge, and what's the way forward in terms of filling these posts? Thank you.
Thank you. Member Allen.
I'm covered, Chair.
Thank you. Member Bosman.
I'm good, thank you, Chairperson.
Member Makamba Bocha.
Chairperson, thank you very much. Sorry, I don't have any questions on the page that you are referring to, but can I use my airtime to finish off the last question that I had on the last round on the issue of the school governing body? On page 76, where it stated that the South African school...
I did not say yes.
Okay, Chairperson, I'm asking if you can allow me to...
yes yet. I'm going to conclude on the round of questions in this part of the program, and then I will come back to you.
Noted.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right. Okay. Thank you. On page 201 SG, the outcomes of the disciplinary hearings, the correctional counseling, if you could speak to that and what it was, what the content of it was. And the fines, what were the types of fines, and is there monetary value to that fines, and was it all paid? And then on page 202, the sexual assault on learners. I mean, there are 10, but even one is one too many. If you could speak to that content of sexual assault on learners. And then also on page 203, the number of educators that were suspended. If you could speak to that, please. Thank you very much. That's a round of questions.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Mr. Cronje, 99.99% of these questions are in your domain, but let me hand over to you, sir, and then we'll follow up if there's a need. Okay, thank you.
Chair, thank you. Just in terms of the assault, and I think the question related to the measures being taken in order to prevent those and also to address those. And we also work quite closely with the Directorate Specialised Education in putting alternative measures in place. And there's also documents that the teachers can follow for disciplinary actions. And therefore, those workshops are also being held with teachers in general. And then also trying to prevent those. We did see that that number actually came down from the previous financial year. And then similarly with resignation reasons, what we did see, and especially the higher number of resignations, is more in your age grouping 35 and below. And what we did, some of our teachers actually tried to access their pensions in order to buy houses, first-time housing. And also some of them at that point leave for overseas opportunities. But we see also at the age of 40, 44, then some of those also start to come back. And that's the trends that we have actually picked up. But we are also addressing the issue about the financial part through our wellness program, that we give financial guidance to some of those. With regard to the grievances, the nature, it varies in nature, conflict between manager, subordinate, conflict between employees. There's also issues of performance management that we pick up, and then also in terms of appointments where these people are not very happy with the appointment parts. Then filling of the SMS post as referred to on page 178. We didn't actually find any challenge. I think the 2020-21 financial year with COVID and all the various implications of that also made that some of the positions were filled a little bit later than usual. So that's contributing. And then in terms of the corrective counselling, I just want to page there. In terms of the corrective counselling, that's also where employees are referred to our wellness program. They do get then the necessary assistance. It's a managerial referral, and they actually get counselling for those specific transgressions. In terms of the fines, the monetary value, it also varies in terms of what the presiding officer actually impose. And the feedback is that that is actually being paid. And then also in terms of the number of educators that were suspended, the figure is also lower than the previous year, but it's also due to cases where the educator need to be actually taken out of the position, out of the school, because there is an investigation, and they could also influence either the witnesses, or they could interfere with any of the documentation that is actually at the specific school. I think I answered the majority except one or two. I think in terms of the HOD's contract to work, that falls in this financial year, not the previous financial year. Yeah, and maybe just a repeat of the question of the sexual assault. sexual assault on learners. Just the, yeah, in general, it's not. Yeah, it's not taken lightly. In those cases, there's immediate action if it is severe, and then we actually look at suspending the educator or the support staff at the school, and that those cases are then prioritized in order to finalize. Yeah.
That around? Yeah. Can I just follow up in regard to the sexual assaults? A sexual assault on learners. Now there's 10, and I want to ask in regard to educators suspended in this review, is there of these educators that were suspended that were offenders, if I can call it that, in the sexual assault? Or would you not know that?
You have that. You want that, yeah.
That level of detail at the moment, but I can provide that.
So I think, Chairperson, it's one of those questions, a detailed question. So we take it on board. We'll give you a reply.
Okay,
Because
so
I'm sure
we'll
you'll
do it
capture
in
it in a
writing.
minute and
Fine.
send me a
Thanks.
letter, then we'll give the reply.
Thanks, SG. We'll do that in writing to ask the particulars around those matters. Thank you very much. Members, any one of you that wants to still pose questions on these pages on the human resource management? No? No? Member Bosman? No?
I'm good. Thank you very much.
You're good. Okay. Member Mbakamba Bocha, I'm back with you now for that question of yours. Member Mbakamba Bocha.
Chairperson, am I audible?
You
Thank
are.
you. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you for the opportunity, Chair. My last question is on page 76, where it's titled School Governing Body. It stated that the South African Schools Act stipulates that the governance of the school is vested in the SGB. So it is also stated that the school principal acts as an ex officio member of the SGB. So the question there is that if the majority members of the SGB who are vested with governance powers decide that it's not safe for schooling to continue during COVID-19 for the safety of their children, and then the principal acts according to the wishes of the SGB, who is to blame when the school closes? Is the principal of the SGB, or can I please get clarity on this issue? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that question. The issue is that the closure of a school is vested in the head of Department of Education. That's actually the answer to that question. So whether the principal is ex officio member or not, the closure of the school is vested in the head of Department of Education, and there's a process that is followed. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Minister.
I just also want to add that there's a big difference between governance and management of a school. And I think there are many governing bodies who don't seem to understand that. And I think it's something that really, if this committee is wanting to assist, could do a lot to assist in people's understanding of that, because the principal of a school is actually the representative of the head of department. And so I think that's quite an important thing to note. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Member Vakamba Bocha, you got your response to your question. Members, if there is...
Yes.
Thank you very much, ma'am. If there is still a burning question that you have that you need to pose now in regard to the HR matters, I will allow. No. Okay. All right. So this brings us to the public hearing part of this annual report for the Standing Committee or for the Department of Education. And there are members of the public who have indicated that they wish to pose a question or two. Now, in regard to that, and you are mainly online, I just want to say that the annual report is under review. So I am allowing, therefore, for you to pose questions in regard to this annual report. And you need to indicate to me the page that you are asking your question on. So with that said, please use the raise your hand function to indicate that you are ready to pose your question. Thanks. Okay, I have indicated Rita Desai. Please pose your question and please indicate the page that you are on.
Good afternoon, Chairman. I am basically, I'm referring to the disability or the disability part of the entire document. I refer basically to the keynote speakers, the minister and the SG, and the addresses to the report. And my biggest concern is that disability has not really been discussed in this report as a standing out topic in terms of mainstreaming and inclusion and access. I would like to ask the question in terms of how in the future will the white paper on disability be used and actually be actioned in terms of Western Cape education? Because currently I see we're talking about special schools, but I don't think special schools is the answer to mainstreaming, because at the end of the day, we want more kids with disabilities coming through the education system and especially enrolling at tertiary education. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Desai. SG, Minister.
Thank you very much for that question, Mr. Desai. If I could ask Berenice, if you could perhaps just talk about the efforts that the department has made in relation to disability to start off with. And then I also want to perhaps just draw a reference. If we read on page 98 and 99, there is there's reference there, Chairperson, in the report to various things that we have done. But I'm going to ask Ms. Daniels if she could please just speak to it. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So in terms of our efforts to promote inclusion, we have one school per circuit, each of our 64 circuits that we are developing as full service stroke inclusive schools. And then we've got another 110 that are part of phase 2. What we've done with our special schools is over time to transform them so that they become special school resource centers. They don't only cater for the learners in the school, but they also do outreach. And the idea is only those with really high level support should be in the school for as long as they need it. And as early as we can to place them then in full service inclusive schools or in ordinary schools with support. So we have 20 outreach teams from our special schools that are multidisciplinary with therapists, special education teachers, psychologists that provide support in our ordinary schools. And so we incrementally will be converting more and more schools to become more inclusive. A challenge that we have is that there hasn't been dedicated funding from National Treasury, from DBE for this endeavour. And in terms of the White Paper 6, you will know that the first implementation period was 2001 to 2021. And before the end of the year, I think there's going to be a review to see how well the country has done, what more needs to be put in place. But we as a province has tried with own resources to try and advance the ideals in the White Paper 6. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Desai, you got the content of the response?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I just want to check, Mr. Mbiko, are you online? Mr. Mbiko? Does not seem so. Okay, we shall assist Mr. Mbiko to put his question in writing to the department. With that said, are there anybody else online who wish to pose a question on the annual report to the Department of Education? Going. Mr. Desai, you have raised your hand once more.
Sorry, Ms. Chairperson. What I need to say is that it's very disheartening that the department has not really used all the budget for this year. And at the same time, they say no budget has been allocated to disability. It's really something that saddens me, because what is disability then something that has been overlooked? I need to ask the question. And then at the same time, why is it that we not, like we have special schools for physical science and for mathematics, why can't we have schools within certain areas specialized with certain disabilities, and instead of trying to have one school mainstream everything, because that at the end of the day is going to need more resource. It's just something I open up, and I would really, this is the advocacy for disability standing up here, and I really need, please, I will be at the next meeting in a year's time, and hopefully I see budget allocated. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Desai. SG?
No, thank you for the question, Mr. Desai. I think the department also invites engagement, Chairperson, on these matters. But if I could ask Mr. Desai to actually look at page 98 and 99 for the annual report, we do actually detail there all the things the department is doing, but we accept obviously it can never be enough. So obviously, as Mr. Desai mentioned, he's advocating for the department to look at it, and clearly we are open to that. But I mean, there's accessibility projects that were completed, there's assessment committees, there's Braille and sign language translation, there's computer-assisted voice-to-text and text-to-voice scribes, oral assessments. There's a whole lot there, Chairperson, that we are doing. But I think let's take the comment of Mr. Desai on board.
Mr. Desai, thank you very much for your comments, sir, and the questions that you have posed, and really showing the interest to education. Thank you very much. I'm going to ask again. Okay. I'm going to ask again any other member of the public who wishes to pose a question before I close on the matter. Thank you very much. I want to say at this juncture, thank you very much for everybody who has joined in dealing with the presentation of the annual report for the Department of Education. And members, thank you very much. We have decreased in numbers in the chamber, but thank you for all of you that availed yourself to be present, both online, to those members that are online and those that are in the chamber. I think it's the first time in a long time that we are together in this chamber. And I want to say, Minister and SG, and to all the officials present, thank you for being present with us in person in the chamber. We have not seen a group of you for a very, very long time, SG. So it is the first time in a very long time. And I want to say, and I take liberty as speaking as the chair for this standing committee, to really say a big thank you to our teachers out there. And they have really demonstrated resilience in this tough time that we are going through. And, adhering to the promise of quality education to every learner in every classroom, in every school in this province. So please bestow our heartfelt gratitude to them for being there for all our children and learners in this province. With that said, Minister, I'm going to give an opportunity for some closing remarks as well as to the SG.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, members, for the constructive engagement. And yeah, we always welcome oversight. We have a huge department to run. It's not easy. The strains have become worse over the years, and now COVID was a real curveball for us. And I do thank you for the acknowledgements that we have had from the committee. And again, thank you to the team. I think they've done a great job, and I'm sure they will continue to do so. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, from our side, maybe the thing that I do want to thank the committee for is the constructive nature of this engagement. Education is a contested terrain. It's a difficult terrain. And the conversations are normally difficult because the answers aren't easy. They're also not quickly. It's an industry where you make a move now, 12 years later, you determine whether you've made an error or not. It's not just a quick pivot. I think that makes the conversation hard, but thank you for keeping us on our toes. I think as a department, I think we welcome that oversight. And I think we assure you of our commitment to make sure that we do actually reach that vision that you put out, into reminding us, quality education. And then to just thank all the members here for the questions, to thank you as the chairperson. Minister, thank you to you for leadership. And to my team, thank you for the preparation. I really do appreciate it. Thank you very much.
I omitted to say to you, sir, that it will be the first matric result for you this year. So all the best.
Thank you.
And we are awaiting those results.
Thank you.
Everything of the best for you. I want to say that we have included the entire department for lunch. So. Now, the entire department here. I don't mean the department out there. I mean those of you who are here, we have included. So please enjoy the lunch.
Okay.
We made a special effort, so asseblief go. Then in terms of us, we will conclude on our administrative tasks hereafter. Go well, keep well. See you in Scopa.
Thank you. Yeah, that was good. Thank you. Thanks, Wada.